Welcome back to All at Once Well Read. I'm Liz, and today I'm going to be doing my May wrap-up. Before I get into that, let's see what's on repeat.
Baby, let all them voices slip away.
It's been an interesting reading month. I've read some really great books, but I also read some duds. And I also DNF'd one book, so let's get right into it. The first book I read in the month of May is The Jetsetters by Amanda Eyre. This book was chosen by my adult book club for the month of May, and I read it right away, like first thing in the month. And I have to be honest, this was not my favorite. I rated it a 3 out of 5, and I feel like I was being pretty generous. So the premise of this book is that there is this older woman named Charlotte Perkins, and she's a widow, and she decides that she's going to enter this contest to win a Mediterranean cruise. She wins, and then she sets off with her 3 children to go on this cruise and reunite and reconnect. Charlotte's children are all grown up, and they each have their own little thing that's like holding them back. Like one of her daughters is in a loveless marriage and she feels rather stagnant in her life. The other one is a struggling actress. And then the third child is this man who is kind of just figuring himself out. He's trying to come out to his family, but he doesn't know how to best go about doing so. And one of the things that bothered me about this book is that each of these characters, including Charlotte Perkins, all kind of very much fit in these molds, and they don't, in my opinion, ever end up pushing out of them. So it was frustrating to see just kind of a pretty level storyline throughout and not a whole lot of dynamic with those characters. You would think if you're gonna read a book about a Mediterranean cruise that you would actually get some snippets and some great lush details about these places that they're traveling to, but you don't. The author spends so much time drudging the reader through all of the family drama that's going on that you never really get to immerse yourself in those places. And I don't know about you guys, but a Mediterranean cruise or like that area of the world is definitely a bucket list item for me. So I was hoping for it so much. And even the characters don't ever really get a chance to sink into their environment because they're so bogged down with all of the family drama. All in all, The Jetsetters was a disappointment to me. I was really hoping for more, and I ended up not even really caring about any of the characters, save one scene where 2 of them are bonding, and that was a really, really nice moment. But yeah, Reese Witherspoon chose this book for her book club recently, and I feel like I missed the boat. I feel like I don't understand why people love this book so much, so sorry. The second book that I read in the month of May was Ella, Minnow, P by Mark Dunn. This is what the students chose to read for the book club in May, and wow, did I hate this book. I didn't even finish it, but let me tell you what it's about. So there's this fictional island off the coast of South Carolina, and on this island they have a statue dedicated to the man who came up with the famous pangram, and now I'm not going to remember. Oh, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. It includes all the letters of the alphabet. So there's this statue, and one by one, the letters on the statue or the plaque or whatever begin to fall off. And when they do, the people in this town are no longer allowed to use those letters in any written communication. This book is composed of letters, and they're written from character to character. And basically each letter is just that character complaining about not being able to use that specific letter anymore, and then trying to get fancy to come up with other words that aren't comprised of that letter. And frankly, every single letter, even though they're written by different characters, felt to me like it was written by Elizabeth Bennet's mother. And if you know anything about that lady in Pride and Prejudice, you know how torturous this book is. I just, sometimes I wonder how books get published, don't you? Needless to say, I did not finish Ella Minnow P. My life is too short to be wasting my time on stuff like this. Sorry, Mark Dunn. Do better next time. Luckily, I had something on the docket that I was super excited for, and that is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. Thank the heavens that this book arrived on my doorstep and saved me from Mark Dunn. So a few years ago, I read Circe by Madeline Miller, and I absolutely loved it. And I didn't have any idea that I was interested in reading about mythology. But this book, if you have not read this book and you're interested in dipping your toes into the world of mythology and retellings, this is a fantastic start. I love this book. And then I also had read Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, enjoyed that one, not quite as much. And I also read A Thousand Ships by Natalie Haynes. So with these three under my belt, I have been waiting for something along these lines for what feels like years. The premise of Ariadne is that Ariadne is the princess of Crete. She's the daughter of Minos and Pasiphae. And Minos pisses off the gods at one point, and the gods decide that instead of punishing him directly, they're going to punish his wife, or they're going to punish him through his wife. And so they decide that they're going to make it so that Pasiphae is only attracted to animals sexually. Lovely. So she goes off into a meadow and finds herself a bull. And you can do the math. We end up with the Minotaur. And anyway, so King Minos decides that he's going to put the Minotaur into a labyrinth below the city designed by Daedalus. And that's kind of the basis of this story. In general, King Minos is a piece of work, and he ends up having a beef with the city of Athens. And so Athens has to send 14 children / teenagers annually over to Crete as a sacrifice, or as, I guess, sort of an offering. And those people are then put into the labyrinth to be devoured by the Minotaur. It's super barbaric, and Ariadne decides that she's had enough of this. And that idea is even furthered when the Prince of Athens, Theseus, decides he's going to volunteer himself as tribute in the hopes of saving his people and killing the Minotaur. When Ariadne sees Theseus arrive on the shores of Crete, she basically thinks he's a hottie, and his green eyes are mesmerizing and whatever. So not only is she motivated to end the process of this sacrifice, but she also realizes that that's kind of what Theseus is here to do. And she decides to help him, and also with the help of Daedalus. So then the story kind of goes forward after the Minotaur is killed and goes through the stories of all of these characters and becomes quite an epic tale. I absolutely loved this book. One of the things that I love most about reading reimaginings like this is that each writer comes at the same characters in different ways. For example, we get to learn about Daedalus and Icarus a bit in Circe, and then maybe in these two as well. But in Ariadne, Daedalus plays a pivotal role because he designed the labyrinth, and we also get to see the reason behind his design of the infamous wings that carried Icarus to the sun, where the wax was melted and he plummeted to his death in the ocean. And then we also get to see the aftermath of that, and how Daedalus sort of moves on and tries to find his new identity after losing his son. So just when I read a retelling like this, I feel like I'm getting a deeper exploration of the same characters than the one that I read before, and it's just going to continue as I explore this genre. Okay, so last summer I read Beach Read by Emily Henry and just adored it. I feel like this is one of those romances that had the romance at the core, but then explored so many other facets of life and people that it kept me hooked and, really made me think about things other than just like a hate to love romance that's explored in the book. So I fell in love with Emily Henry by reading Beach Read. So when I heard that she was coming out with People We Meet on Vacation this year, you bet your bippy I was signing on immediately. And especially when people started to compare it to When Harry Met Sally, that was like a no-brainer. I knew I was going to end up reading and probably loving this book. Okay, so the premise of People We Meet on Vacation is that there are two main characters, Alex and Poppy, who go to the same college. And they wind up taking a ride share home together for one summer. They bicker for the first bit of the ride, and then they start to connect a little bit. And since they're going to be spending the summer in the same city, they decide that they might hang out a time or two. As the summer continues, they bond and they become very, very close friends. And that friendship continues over the span of 10 years, which is how long the book explores as well. Pretty early on in the book, we realized that something happened along the line for Alex and Poppy, and they experience a falling out in their friendship that causes them to not communicate for 2 years. And then at one point, Poppy decides that she's going to reach out to Alex and ask him if he wants to go on one last vacation after having vacationed together for years and years and years prior. Now she's going to try to get him to go on one last vacation in the hopes of fixing this friendship that had meant so much to both of them. What's so amazing about the structuring of this piece is that we not only get the story of the vacation that they're going to take in hopes of fixing their friendship, but we also get flashbacks to each of the vacations that they had taken leading up to their falling out. So it's such a great opportunity to see not only where they've been, because they go to some amazing places, and unlike the Jetsetters, Emily Henry does take time to really immerse the reader in those locations, but we also get to see the progression of their friendship from the time that they were just sort of getting to know each other to the time when they were inseparable and knew damn near everything about each other. So that's really cool. One of the reasons why I love this book so much, and one of the reasons I flew through it in less than 36 hours, is because the friendship that Alex and Poppy experience, like just the base friendship, is so very similar to my friendship with one of my closest friends. Alex and Poppy live in separate cities for a majority of their friendship, and so do my friend and I. And let me tell you, long distance friendship is really hard, and it takes two people who really do value the friendship to keep that going. And that's what we see with Alex and Poppy. So it's interesting as someone who is currently experiencing this, aside from the this is a romance, no. But it's interesting to see an author explore that so thoroughly. I was watching an interview with Emily Henry recently where she was talking about the book, and she mentioned that she's never personally experienced a friendship dynamic that is similar to what Alex and Poppy have in the book. And when she said that, it just blew my mind, because as I was reading this, I felt like I was reading about my own life in so many ways. And for her to never have experienced that herself, but to come up with such authentic dialogue and scenarios is just incredible and makes me respect her as a writer even more than I already had. So anyway, I absolutely loved People We Meet on Vacation. I am a diehard Emily Henry reader now, and anything she writes, I will read. The last book I read in the month of May was Hollow Kingdom by Kira Jane Buxton. I read this at the recommendation of a booktuber named Scott. His account is Book Invasion if you're interested in following him. But he talks about how this was his favorite book of 2020. And so when he said that, I read the synopsis and it sounded like a really, really unique take on a zombie apocalypse because it's written from the perspective of animals as opposed to humans or like survivors. So yeah, it just seemed really unique. I watched an interview with Kira Jane Buxton. She seemed like a pretty rad lady, so I gave it a shot, and I have thoughts. The majority of this book is narrated by a crow, a domesticated crow named St, and he is the pet of this guy named Big Jim. And when Big Jim experiences his zombification, St and the dog Dennis have to go and figure out how they're going to survive, and then they decide that they're going to try to save the rest of the domesticated animals that have been abandoned by their zombie owners, and try to save them so that they can carry on with the world. So my biggest issue with this book is the writing style. Kira Jane Buxton describes herself as a comedian, and that does come through on the pages. When you start this book, it really is edgy and funny, and it pulls you in, but honestly, it never stops. And the problem with that is, it's like if you've ever had a friend who thinks they're really, really funny and they're trying to be quippy all the time and witty and like crack jokes, and you're just like, okay, like calm down. It's kind of like that. Like you just end up wanting some realism within this thing, and for it to go to a place that it never totally gets to. There were a couple parts that I did really love. There was one scene, one death that just ripped my heart right out. So the author can do that. I just didn't see enough of it. Around the time in the book where that death happens, there is this absolutely beautiful moment where the author kind of goes into some musings about the phrase elephants never forget. And I'm not going to say anything more about that if you do end up reading this book, because that part and her interpretation of that phrase is so lovely and something that I've never seen in a book before. So for that, I do appreciate this book, but overall, this thing just was not for me. There is a sequel. I won't be reading it. Sorry, Scott. But anyway, that is Hollow Kingdom. So that's it for the books I read in May. I hope you enjoyed this video. Go ahead and click subscribe, tell your friends, and I'll see you for the next one.